fortunate to have such a sunny and pleasant day on this occasion as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of Ball State University. We're very pleased that you were all able to accept our invitation to be with us this morning. On behalf of all of the university, I'd like to thank you for interrupting your regular Friday schedule to be with us on this occasion. Our program today is designed to do 2 or 3 things, and if additional results occur, we'll chalk that up to serendipity. First, we note with pride and pleasure the very real evidence of growth of this institution over the last 10 years. Growth in size of physical plant, student enrollment, and in the quality of educational experiences offered by the faculty of this institution. Second, we celebrate and reaffirm the fortunate and harmonious relationships between the university and the community of Muncie. Either would be the less without the other. The reciprocal relationships of the community on the university and the university on the community have been beneficial to both. We hope and plan for the continuation and further development of these cooperative bonds. And third, as we pause at this milestone of 10 years, having looked backward with pride and pleasure, we turn to the future, hoping to divine those possibilities which, undertaken, will permit us in the next 25 years to maximize the potentials of this university so that it may achieve another period of productive service to the citizens of this community and to the wider community of the state of Indiana. You'll see from your programs that a number of activities have been planned for today for your information, entertainment, inspiration, and participation. And we hope to attain several of these goals in this morning's session. Following this session, you are all invited to observe the university in action. You may attend classes, exhibits, and tour the campus between the hours of 11 and 2. During that period, you're also invited to take luncheon at one of the 3 residence halls, Neuer, Studebaker, or La Fala. And at 2 o'clock, you're invited to participate in one of the 30 forums which are listed in your program. These forums are intended to be discussion groups composed of students, faculty, townspeople, and out-of-town guests. And the topics that have been selected are designed to focus our attention on the opportunities that lie ahead of us in the next 10 to 25 years. You'll know from the program that there is a reception planned at the Student Center from 5 to 6, this to be followed by a dinner in the Student Center, at which we'll have the good fortune of hearing from Mr. Van Smith, Chairman of the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, and Dr. John Pruce, President of the University. At 8 o'clock, we return to this auditorium for a musical celebration as described in your program. Now, to begin this morning's festivities, we'll hear the University Concert Choir under the direction of Mr. Lemuel Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Someplace behind the stage, Mr. Anderson and the choir, and may I, on behalf of the audience and all of us who participated in this program, express my thanks and, again, your thanks for that very fine presentation. Now I'd like to attempt a very dangerous act, and that is introducing some people in the audience and not all the others. The danger, of course, is that I will unwittingly neglect to call your name. May I apologize before we even get started. There are some people who are scheduled to be here, and I know we'd like to have them stand and be recognized. Let me call the names of the members of the University Board of Trustees and ask them to stand. Mr. and Mrs. Alexander Bracken, Mrs. Thomas Harrison, Mrs. Robert O'Malley, Mr. and Mrs. Edwin Showeiler, Mr. Will Parker, Mr. Harold Wallace, and I believe Mr. Lee Morris was unable to attend. Would you recognize the presence of our trustees, please? We're fortunate to have some representatives from the Indiana General Assembly. On stage, we have Senator Rodney Piper and Mr. J.J. Bailey planned to be with us today. Is Mr. Bailey here? Thank you, Mr. Bailey. And Mr. Piper, would you stand and be recognized at this time? And I believe that Mr. Van Smith, the chairman of the Indiana Conference for Higher Education, one of our speakers this evening, is with us today, is he? Van, back there? Thank you. We've been advised that we will have delegations from our sister institutions today, and Mr. Donald Brown, Assistant Provost of Purdue University, may be here. If he is, I'd like to have him stand. If he's not here yet, he will be. President John W. Ryan of Indiana University. I don't know whether John is here yet. And our own President Emeritus, Dr. John R. Emmons, ought to be in the auditorium somewhere. There he is. Thank you. President Alan Rankin of Indiana State University was unable to attend, but he did want us to read the following telegram. Congratulations on our joint birthday as universities. We are proud to proclaim our twinship, as well as our respect for the high standards of excellence for which Ball State University represents so fully. Happy birthday and best wishes to all. Many people have invested time and effort to bring this celebration to fruition. The names of some of them are listed on the last page of your program. I'd like to pay a special tribute to the person who conceived the idea of University Day and persuaded the rest of us that we should undertake that venture. That's Dr. Victor B. Lawhead, Dean of Undergraduate Programs. And if he's not behind the stage, I'd like to have him and the other members of the planning committee who are out here to stand. I mean Vice President Byro, Ball, Ron Hudson, there's Ron down there, other members of the planning committee. Would you express your appreciation to him? It's now my privilege to present Dr. John Pruce, President of the University, who will give the official welcome for the day.
Thank you, Dr. Burkhart. Ladies and gentlemen, over the years, it has been my happy privilege to welcome many groups to the campus. This morning's opportunity, however, is the happiest. We are honored as well as pleased that you have taken of your time to be with us on this significant occasion. The evolution from Indiana State Normal School Eastern Division, which in 1918 occupied the some 65 acres of land and 2 buildings given to the state by the Ball brothers, to this institution granted university status by the legislature and Governor Roger D. Brannigan on February 8, 1965, has been both significant and gratifying. All those who have had a part in that evolution and those whose lives have been touched by it have special reason to celebrate this day. From normal school to teachers' college to multi-purpose university, programs have been broadened, faculty enlarged and strengthened, student and alumni bodies made representative of virtually all areas of the world, services vastly increased. Our program today has been designed to permit some reflection on past accomplishments, but more to anticipate the challenges and the opportunities of the next decades. On behalf of all members of the Ball State University community, I extend a most cordial welcome to this University Day and hope that you will participate freely in the day's events. As many of you know, I am a native of Michigan. That state's motto is, appropriately, Si quaerus peninsulam amoenam circumspice. If you seek a beautiful peninsula, look about you. I would take the liberty of paraphrasing that motto this morning. Si quaerus universitas amoenam circumspice. If you would seek a beautiful university, look about you.
Thank you very much, President Cruz. We've spoken of the community of Ball State University, and the next part of your program is designed to emphasize that statement with reality. Representatives of the several aspects of that community are to give us a word of greetings on this important occasion. I'll call first on Mr. Mike Closser, President of the Student Association. Right?
10 years ago, most of the present students that are going here now were probably between the ages of 8 to 12 years old. And although possibly maybe some had never even heard of Ball State and others had never known where it really was, there were people here working very hard and striving and trying to build a dream. And as was already stated by President Pruis, you can look about you today and you can see that dream. And so as a student and on behalf of the students, I would like to thank all those people who have been responsible for building this dream. We'd like to thank Dr. Pruis and Dr. Emmons. We'd like to thank the Board of Trustees, the faculty, and the staff. We'd like to thank the architects and the engineers and the contractors and the hard hats who actually built this university. Most of all, as a student and on behalf of the students, I want to thank the people of the state of Indiana who said that we're going to invest in the future, that we are going to invest in young people, and that we are going to invest for progress in the future and in our state of Indiana. And so perhaps 25 years from now, our present student body will be able to look back upon their years here and say with great satisfaction that Ball State truly prepared them for the challenges that they had to meet. And on that note, I'd like to again stress that we are very thankful for the opportunity for higher education and for a great university such as we have here today.
Thank you very much, Mike. And the next speaker is Dr. Morton Rosenberg, Professor of History, Chairman of the University Senate, representing the faculty.
Thank you, Dean Burkhart. I deem it a privilege as well as a pleasure speaking on behalf of the University Senate and as spokesman for the faculty to welcome you here today as we commemorate our 10th anniversary of service to the people of Indiana under the name of Ball State University. An anniversary is an occasion for happiness and celebration, and indeed we are happy, and we will be doing some celebrating during the course of this day. It is also a time for re-examination, reflection, and rededication, and indeed also during the course of this day we will be engaging in these activities as well. An act of the legislature, of course, cannot create an instant university. The university is the byproduct of long and hard work, dedication, cooperation, under the wise leadership of an able administration, and Ball State has been blessed with exactly this: a dedicated faculty, an inspired student body, and the support of the citizens of Indiana. On behalf of the faculty, then, I thank you for being here today to share this memorable occasion with us. And I pledge to all of you that the faculty of Ball State University will continue to meet its responsibilities, which has been reposed in us by the legislature and the citizens of Indiana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rosenberg. And speaking to us this morning on behalf of the Alumni Association, its current president is Paula Webster Cart.
Ball State alumni and friends evidence support and commitment to the ideals of a higher education and to the role of this university in meeting those ideals. One of the tangible ways is through financial contributions and, to a limited degree, personal service. Alumni and friends in 1974 contributed a total of $404,960,008. And there were 10,370 alumni donors, making an average contribution of $18.63. Ball State University appeared on 8 of 9 honor rolls in the American Association of State Colleges and Universities classifications, comparing alumni giving in almost 400 member institutions. It is in this manner that alumni and friends are saying, hey, we believe in what the university has done. However, is the university tapping all the resources of alumni available? There is the resource of alumni input through service. Alumni advisory task forces or committees could address the question, how does the university avoid being isolated from reality and avoid preparing students for things they will not be doing? The product, the alumna, could effectively evaluate curriculum and make meaningful recommendations in the effort to assure that programs are meeting the needs of the future. Such current trial programs as using alumni resources in identifying prospective students and in placing graduates could be expanded to other areas of the university. The potential from input for the real world through alumni is present. The vehicle is established in such a program as the sessions today to tap the resources for expanding the future of the university. Alumni have and can continue contributing financially, and alumni can contribute as individuals from society. Ball State Alumni Care, please call on us.
The president of the university has asked me for the privilege of introducing the next distinguished speakers, and that's an offer I can't refuse. President Bruce.
Any college or university to be maximally productive depends on a sympathetic and cooperative city government. The Honorable Paul J. Cooley has been mayor of the city of Muncie during the past 7 years, and has been most sympathetic and cooperative and helpful to us. And I'm pleased to present him to you at this time. Mayor Paul Cooley.
Thank you, John. I became mayor and you became president of this university pretty close to the same time, and I hope we both last. In the vernacular of the day, I suppose you could, it would be right to say that we've come a long way, baby. And if I could express the feelings of the town, the city of Muncie, also in an ad that you very often see, a grocery ad, I believe, it says, "We value you." And that is really the truth. In the last 10 years, under your leadership and the able leadership of Dr. Emmons, we have seen the solving of the physical plant problems of Ball State in that student housing, and even though there might be some students that would argue that point, in the classroom buildings, in the beautiful new library, and many, many facilities that have taken place in the last 10 years. And as we look forward to the future, in the face of declining enrollments possibly, I look under your able leadership, John, to a meeting of the challenge of the times, and you have come a long way toward climbing down out of the ivory tower and getting down and battling and helping solve some of the problems that face society today, and I look forward to hopefully working with you and in concert to solve some of the problems not only of the state of Indiana but right here at home in Muncie. Thank you very much.
In the 1965 Indiana General Assembly, the bill changing our name to Ball State University was sponsored by 2 local representatives and 2 local senators. The sponsors in the House were Representative David Metzger of Muncie and Representative George Stevenson of Yorktown. In the Senate, the sponsors were Senator Rodney Piper of Muncie and Senator Keith Fraser of Portland. We're delighted to have the Honorable Rodney Piper, again a member of the Indiana Senate, to extend greetings at this time. Senator Rodney Piper.
President Cruz, Mayor Cooley, Dr. Gould, Dr. Burkhart, distinguished guests. Getting here this cold morning from Indianapolis brings to mind the problems I had in introducing legislation to rename Ball State Teachers College to Ball State University, and seeing it through the Indiana Senate, the House of Representatives, and getting the governor to sign it. 10 years ago, on February the 8th, 1965, at 2 p.m., Governor Roger Brannigan signed into effect the law that changed the name of Ball State Teachers College to Ball State University. That was the day the university, the city of Muncie, the state of Indiana can be justly proud. That was the day that Ball State University moved forward to a bigger and a better educational system. I hope Ball State University can look to the future in the era of today and tomorrow. I believe that our educational system has many dangerous, unsolved, long postponed problems that will explode to the surface during the coming years. Changing the name from Ball State Teachers College to Ball State University is a step in the right direction. in our struggle for educational supremacy and in our fight for a decent way of life for all America is a strong, healthy, vital, educated people. Realizing our dependency upon an educated citizenry, I will continue to champion education in the state of Indiana. We cannot, we shall not, we will not lose our American way of life if we invest in the future of America, in the leaders of tomorrow, today. In looking into the future, let us look at the people who will make the future. Let we of today educate both the minds and the bodies of the leaders of tomorrow, so they and their children can be equipped to face the harsh realities of a life in a democracy where competition and the pursuit of talent are based on the ability of the initiative of each person. Let us never forget we get out of life what we put into it. And in education, this proof is self-evident. Congratulations, Ball State University, on your 10th anniversary. It was my pleasure to give you a helping hand.
Thank you very much, Senator. The Honorable Otis R. Bowen, Governor of the state of Indiana, a good friend of Ball State University and indeed a frequent visitor to the campus, wanted very much to be with us today. Since that is impossible because of other commitments, we are most pleased that he has sent Mr. James Smith, not only a member of his staff, but also a Ball State University graduate, though just 1 year prior to our becoming a university, Jim. But Mr. Smith is here to represent Governor Bowen. Mr. James Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Pruse. As Dr. Pruse said, the governor, as you know, is recuperating from surgery, and although he is back to work and working very hard, I might add, he is not able to travel, so it is my pleasure to be here. In looking over the past 10 years, as Dr. Pruse said, I graduated in 1964 from Ball State, and it was still Ball State Teachers College at that time. As I recall, Paula, one of the primary concerns that we had in changing the university was changing the dorm hours for the girls from midnight to 1 a.m. and had not really concerned ourselves or even thought that there might be a possibility to participate in the policy decisions of the university as a member of the Board of Trustees. So there has been growth in many, many areas. 10 years ago, as Dr. Pruse mentioned, I was out in the cold, cruel world, having moved out of the Sigma Chi house down the street, and my boss was minority leader of the house. The past 10 years, the growth of this university has been incredible, and driving around this morning, it just amazes me the changes that have taken place. It has been our pleasure to work with you in the past. On behalf of Governor Bowen, we congratulate you on the past 10 years, and we are looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Each spring, Ball State University recognizes the members of its faculty who have completed a lifetime of teaching and are in that spring retiring. And on such occasions, we search for an appropriate speaker to celebrate the work and the lives of these individuals. In 1959, we found a man who had written, and I quote, "To me, a teacher is a person with a touch of immortality. Let me explain what I mean. The desire to teach is a deep-seated one. It permeates the hearts and souls of thousands upon thousands who have never given conscious thought to entering the profession. We all teach in one way or another, and in such activity we find unusual and almost mysterious satisfaction. The mother and father in daily contacts with their children are teaching constantly, teaching habits of thinking, living, sometimes by precept, sometimes by example. Children teach one another at their play. Colleagues in business teach one another in their professional associations. Why does this happen? Because we all sense, directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, that to leave a vestige of oneself in the development of another is a touch of immortality. As the university sums up the past 10 years and looks ahead to the end of the century, it seemed particularly appropriate to bring to the campus the man who wrote those words and who spoke others like them to our faculty now 14 years ago. We welcome him back to Ball State University to inspire us again as we look to the future of this institution. Dr. Samuel Gould's professional experience and current interests have, of course, prepared him well for this assignment. He was educated at Bates College, New York University, and at Harvard University in this country, and at Oxford and Cambridge in Britain. He has had a long succession of leadership roles in higher education. He began his career as a high school teacher of speech. He has been president of Antioch College, chancellor of the University of California, Santa Barbara, president of the Educational Broadcasting Corporation, chancellor of the State University of New York. If I were to cite just a few of the honors accorded to him, they would include membership in Phi Beta Kappa, listing in Who's Who in America, and just this month, a listing in the current issue of Change magazine, which identified outstanding leaders in American education. Dr. Gould holds honorary degrees from 12 eminent colleges and universities. He has written more than 5 books in higher education, the most recent being Diversity by Design. Most significantly for our celebration today, he has turned his attention to needed reform in higher education. And in pursuit of this interest, he has served as chairman of the Commission on Non-Traditional Study, member of the Commission on Cooperative Education, member of the United States Office of Education's Advisory Council on Graduate Study, and on many other national commissions devoted to the improvement related to the media, the performing arts, to the better use of educational resources. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Dr. Samuel Gould, who will speak on the subject, Today's Education with Yesterday's Goals. Dr. Gould.
Thank you, Dean Burkhart, President Preuss, and Mayor Cooley, Senator Piper, Mr. Smith, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm most appreciative of the very gracious introduction by Dean Burkhart. I must say, however, that years of experience have made me a little wary of introductions. I've had some rather interesting experiences along this line. I remember, for example, once after speaking on an occasion such as this, attending a reception thereafter, and as I was standing in the receiving line and people were going by, a young man about 15 years old came along and took me by the hand, shook it, and said, "You talk too long." And before I had a chance to react, he was gone down the line. And then a few minutes later, as I saw the line continue to move, I noticed he was coming back, and same young man came up and shook my hand again, and this time he said, "You talk too loud." And once more he was gone before I had a chance to say anything to him. And lo and behold, pretty soon I saw him coming round a third time, and this time I thought I'd be ready for him. And sure enough, he put out his hand, and this time he said, "You didn't say much." And just as I was about to respond, the lady who was standing next to me in the receiving line said, "Pay no attention to that young man. He's an absolute idiot. All he does is go around repeating what he hears everybody else say." Back in the 19th century, His Royal Highness Prince George, the Duke of Cambridge, said, Gentlemen, there have been great changes in my time, great changes. But I can say this, every change has been made at the right time, and the right time is when you cannot help it. It's a great pleasure to be here again after an absence of 14 years, and to see that you're not waiting for change to be thrust upon you. I recall visiting this campus during President Emmons' administration when Ball State was then hoping to move into a full university status. And so much then was a series of plans and hopes and dreams. Now all of these are rapidly becoming realities. And I congratulate President Preuss and all of you here today, not only on what you've already achieved, but even more on the clear indications that you give, that you recognize that there's so much still to be done. The nature of this day, with its full set of activities, gives ample credibility to your desire to be a dynamic and a vibrant institution. While every period of history has been the target of criticism in its own time, the past decade appears to have been unusually so. Understandably, ours is a most vocal and articulate period. When we look upon our inability to adjust to swift change and to the erosion of fundamental values by an essentially technocratic society, and when we add to this the equal inability to cope with today's instantaneous communication by reacting with good judgment and proper perspective, we know why the outcries become louder and less reasoned. More and more voices are being raised against the bureaucratic weight of government, the frightening impersonality of science and technology, the waywardness of the young and the hypocrisies of the adults, the manipulative trickeries of the mass media, and the credibility gap in national leadership, the callousness toward human suffering and disregard of equal opportunity, or the glaringly evident shortcomings of education. It's a period of protest, of confrontation, of mutual suspicion, of deep-rooted unhappiness. And the cacophony rises and falls from month to month, but it is never totally stilled. It orchestrates the general malaise in which we appear to be caught up and held. It seems sometimes to reach the proportions of a self-destructive, suicidal disease. The charges against higher education in particular come from both sides of the aisle, right or left, and are easily identified. Claims are made that education is irrelevant, impervious to the pressures of change, insensitive to current needs, or conversely, that it has changed so much that its institutions are now becoming no more than substitutes for social agencies. That it is weak and even cowardly when it is confronted by unorthodox sorts of opposition. That it is weak and even cowardly when it is confronted by unorthodox sorts of opposition, or that it is obtusely arrogant and authoritarian, that it is too general in its purposes, or that it is too specialized, that it is too intellectual and aloof, or that it is not intellectual at all and has sold its academic heritage for a mess of materialistic pottage, that it fosters and protects alien ideologies and philosophies, or that it is too much wedded to a capitalistic establishment, that it is improperly organized and atrociously governed, and that it does not instill moral values in the young, or if it does, it chooses values that are no longer important to this generation, that it offers little attention and few rewards to good teaching, that its research is largely misdirected either because it is too dangerous or because it has no relation to reality, that it is financially incompetent and is profligate in handling its resources. Well, when we examine individual instances, we find some truth in all these charges. But this is not the whole truth. Over against these negative indictments should be set the accomplishments of higher education, accomplishments more and more frequently forgotten. If there are minuses, there are also many pluses. The solid achievements of education are evident to each person if he's willing to look for them without prejudice. It should be remembered, for example, that we lead all the nations of the world in educating the highest percentage of college-age youth and in the development of graduate study, professional schools, and research. A nation that has tripled the number of college students in a single decade cannot be said to be lacking entirely in its zeal to offer education. And imperfect as that education may be, it moves steadily toward the democratic goals of enlightenment and competence for all. Colleges and universities have made fantastic contributions to the growth of the nation's economy and to its service functions, governmental and private. And this has come about through advancement of knowledge and provision of manpower in every area of human concern. And let us remind those who shrill endlessly about repression that the colleges and universities are foremost among the few remaining bulwarks of intellectual independence. Among all social institutions today, the university allows more dissent, takes freedom of mind and spirit more seriously, and under considerable sufferance, labors to create an environment closer to the ideal of free expression and for free interchange of ideas and emotions than any institution in the land. By its very nature, the university gives birth to criticism, scrutiny, and dissent. And if credit is to be placed somewhere for the increased degree of audible protest in our land today, then education can claim at least a part of it. For years it was criticized when it presumably did not teach youth to think for themselves. Now that it does, the results are obviously not popular, but they are part of the democratic process we all insist that we prize so highly. Now, these are only a few of the positive achievements that can be cited, but they are rapidly fading from public consciousness as they become overshadowed by an unrelenting series of attacks. There is a danger that the outcries of criticism, some of them well-intentioned and justified, and some designed to identify a scapegoat for the errors of society itself, will render completely ineffective and eventually destroy the present system of higher education before another and better one is devised to replace it. In a time of financial stringency like the present, it is easy to deny support to higher education because of its alleged or real deficiencies. The taxpayers' money can be saved, and education of whatever sort can be reserved for a chosen few who can afford it. So goes one of the arguments. But there is self-delusion on the part of the more rabid critics in their belief that the answer lies in wiping the slate clean and starting over again with a new and more revolutionary approach, whether it be elitist or more fully democratic. No real solution emerges from this view. History attests to the unreality and lack of pragmatism, either in turning back the clock by ignoring the expectations of the many, or in believing that a totally new system can suddenly spring forth full-grown and capable of meeting all of society's needs. Educational change cannot be other than evolutionary, even though the process of evolution can and should develop with far more speed than heretofore. New, more non-traditional approaches are sorely needed, but they will not suddenly supplant all that is traditional. They will augment, they will fortify and enhance the traditional philosophies and methods. They will often add new perspectives and horizons to educational opportunity and possibility. They will open doors to new and unserved parts of our population, and sometimes they will show clearly that the traditional forms also have a role to play. We must not expect quick panaceas to cure all our educational ailments. Now, I've used the title, Today's Education with Yesterday's Goals, and this seems to suggest that there is general agreement as to what yesterday's goals were. I'm not quite certain that this is so, except in our more specialized institutions. The problem, however, is not merely one of agreement. It is rather that yesterday's goals, so far as they can be identified, present serious dilemmas in the context of the wishes of modern society. Some of the goals are still valid, but they run counter to the motivations, the objectives, and the actions of the greater world that surrounds the college or university. We have not only to answer the question of education for whom, which is so great a preoccupation of the American people today, but also education for what, which offers a separate set of inconsistencies or dilemmas. Not too many decades ago, the goals of higher education were predominantly elitist. Even though great public universities existed or were being developed, collegiate education was still for the relatively few, and it prided itself on its humanistic studies. Even the secondary schools were influenced by this, in that there was a sharp division between college preparatory and other students. The former were the hothouse flowers, to be nurtured carefully and never to be sullied by more practical courses. I remember my own unsuccessful efforts as a high school student to be granted permission to take courses in typewriting and shorthand, even without credit. Nor was my school untypical in reflecting the attitude of the time. Today, the goal of elitism has presumably changed to one of equal opportunity for all, or more accurately, an equal right to education for all. As a result, the number of college students has tripled in the past decade, but the demand for more education remains far greater than the ability to meet it. And serious questions are raised as to whether the kinds of education offered are indeed of most benefit to the new types of students. Furthermore, there is considerable reluctance in higher education to adopt new forms, new organizational patterns, new devices by which more students could be accommodated within reasonable expenditures. All the new forms and patterns and devices are suspect because they represent such breaks with tradition, and because they carry with them the fear of even greater depersonalization of our lives than we suffer from already. And whether these suspicions and fears are justified is beside the point. The fact is that they exist and will remain with us for years to come. Meanwhile, as a democratic nation, we are hoist on the petard of our own declarations of principle. We say, for example, that everyone is entitled to as much formal education as can be of benefit, that one should be educated to the full extent of his or her capacity. But then we discover that we cannot as yet deliver on the promise that such a principle reflects. We say also we believe learning is a lifetime process, and that one's education continues and should be encouraged regardless of age and circumstances. But we still have many segments of an adult population for whom nothing or relatively little has ever been done. A new wave of interest is now sweeping the country in what is called the external degree, an opportunity to earn an associate or baccalaureate degree by non-traditional means. An old idea that has suddenly found its time. It offers promise to all sorts of populations. Women who wish to take up studies again once freed of so many household duties, returning war veterans, retired men and women, inmates of penal institutions, employed people who wish to improve their situation, college-age students who prefer to carry on their education according to a more flexible pattern. The idea offers promise, but it also presents dangers, not the least of which is that of a dilution of educational quality. The external degree needs the most careful supervision as it develops, lest charlatans take advantage of its appeal and mislead the public with programs that are anything but educational. It also needs most careful examination in terms of the new agencies or new machinery it will require to broaden the opportunities for access, fashion the means for study, and develop appropriate kinds of recognition for achievement. We seem to be on the threshold of a breakthrough in answering the question, education for whom? And the goal of a more democratized approach is more and more visible as a realistic expectation. Paradoxically, however, this is occurring at a time when there is great distrust of education and educators generally, and when financial austerity is becoming the order of the day. It is also occurring when the educational necessities of minority groups are dramatically clear and cannot be ignored. And it is occurring when our people are confused, dismayed, and frightened by the swift deterioration of humane values in our land, and the stark revelation that, like other countries we have always suspected, we too are not always what we seem to be. All these combine to add to the complexity of the issue. At the same time, they point to the enormous importance we must attach to resolving it. And when we turn to the second question, education for what, we are again baffled. Yesterday's goals, at least its broadest and most important ones, are still valid in concept, but pose dilemmas for any college or university facing the realities of our modern world. Higher education's traditional purposes cause it to be alienated from its own people, not because they are inappropriate for today or because they are unattainable, but rather because they are now looked upon as either radical or naive, depending on the looker's point of view. Suppose we examine just 3 of these goals to illustrate my point. The first is that of emphasizing the liberal arts and humanities, and thus providing a broad general education that prepares students to be effective members of society as a basis for a more specialized career opportunity. The second is that of inculcating values in the human mind and personality so that the student is moral and humane. The third is that of teaching the principles of peace as a cornerstone of democracy and as the only means toward the survival of mankind. Each of these goals appears desirable, yet each runs counter to the real wishes and actions of the society called upon to support them. A materialistic and technologically oriented land does not offer very fertile soil in which to plant the seeds for the growth of meaningful lives. We see the results of technology all around us and are so accustomed to them that we are blind to their implications. We are blind to their effects upon education, where now the greater part of time is devoted to assuring students the means for making a living, acquiring social status, and obtaining more of the comforts of life. In and of itself, this motivation would not be so bad if it did not so completely dominate the educational scene through high school and the undergraduate years. By so doing, it overshadows those aspects of education that are more selfless in purpose and probe more deeply into the proper shaping of human character. Concentration upon self and personal well-being shunts to one side the broader and more far-reaching aspects of life. It places limitations upon thought and action that tend to weaken the deeper motivations we hope for in each individual. But these are the very limitations expected and accepted by society. For colleges and universities to instruct otherwise is to risk adult opprobrium, especially that of the taxpayer. Closely linked with the goal of a liberal education is that of strengthening human values. Here again, the college or university finds itself in a dilemma. It continues in every way it can to press for acceptance of and belief in the moral attributes that have seemed desirable for centuries. Yet, even as it urges youth to accept and believe and practice what appears to be good, it sees the larger society, whether individuals or groups or even nations, ignoring these values and setting examples that range from the ludicrous to the terrifying. And our youth watch these examples with intensity and are ultimately disenchanted or revolted to the point where they outdo their elders in cynicism of attitude and action. Caught on the horns of such a dilemma, higher education retreats to a position of insisting that the exploration of values is not its business at all, thus trying to remove itself from any value judgments. It escapes, if it can, to a preoccupation with pure intellect, while youth escapes to a total preoccupation with emotion. And this has done no more than widen the already wide gulf between the generations. When adults rarely practice what they preach, the young drift toward nihilism. And as this happens, education becomes a marvelously convenient place to put the blame. The third goal, that of peace in our world, creates the largest dilemma of all. As Americans, we have prided ourselves on being the most peace-loving nation on earth, and education has done its fair share of instilling that pride within us. Our pride has encompassed all the wars in our history, which always purported to be a step nearer to our ideals for peace. The Vietnam War was challenged more than any of the others, but it still had its firm adherents. And many people changed their minds about it, not only for ideological reasons, but because the country was being milked dry economically and the costs were intolerable. Defense industries are major keys to the health of our economy, and defense funds have priority over domestic reform. The wars against poverty and disease and urban and rural blight and drugs and man-made pollution are much on our minds.